It's still happy hour with John Gaskins. This round's on me.
The second Tuesday in June, Gateway Lounge. It just feels like that time of the year to shoot the breeze and really dig into guests who, have been here for a while, that everybody knows their name, but maybe not everybody knows their story. And they are living my dream of not working and have time to do this. So it's great to have Mike Begeman here. Everybody knows who Mike is. 399 wins. I tried to add it up as a high school basketball player and coach in South Dakota. Oh, so much work. I went to a website. That included a 70-10 record as a player, Parker High School for the legendary Gail Hoover. He played at Augie, where he was part of a North Central Conference championship team in 1978. That's not easy to do at Augie, and we'll get into that. And then he gets into teaching and coaching, 3 different schools, 3 different levels, lots of state tournaments, 6 runs to the finals, and his last 19 years were at O'Gorman. And, of course, then there was sons Matt and Mitch, and Mitch goes on to be an incredible coach, 2-time state champion, and he played a little bit of a part, I would think, at Roosevelt, and he just resigned. Post-basketball, we know Mike from years and years, a couple decades at Sanford as a manager in public relations, vice president, and for a few years the executive chief of staff. But he's been retired for about 4 years now, and most recently dominating the Minnehaha County Precinct Committeeman vote at 57%. So congratulations.
You've done a lot of homework, John.
Yeah,
we're probably done now.
That took about 5 minutes. No, that's just the start. Congratulations on winning that, by the way.
Well, thank you. It was. I'll be honest. I don't have any political aspirations, but this was just something that I kind of did on a whim, and
yes.
I learned a little bit about it, and I thought, well, I don't really want to run for anything that's going to put me in peer for 2.5 months.
Okay.
But this is another level of being involved and just kind of dovetailing on some things I did when I did work at Sanford Health, on a board with Leadership South Dakota. And so this is kind of just a precinct committee man. I'll represent my voting base in precinct 0316. I had to learn that. But anyway, I'll be headed out to Rapid City in a couple of weeks as a delegate to the state convention, and we're going to have to vote on an attorney general, state senator, South Dakota, or treasurer, I should say. So there are some things that come along with that. Yeah. So I get to take another trip to Rapid City.
Okay, not bad. If you can dovetail that into, for me, the Alex Johnson Hotel, the Vertex Sky Bar, some Black Hills things. Now we're talking.
Great place.
Make a Black Hills trip out of it. Well, cheers. We'll do that.
Cheers.
Congratulations on all your success. I'm so happy you've been getting to enjoy retirement years. And before I forget, it is happy hour. You're a first-time guest. So happy hour drink of choice. When you were working, the end of a long workday, the end of a long round of golf, you have one choice rest of your life, one time. Any drink, what would you go with?
I'm pretty low-key. It's just usually a Miller Lite.
Okay.
And that's kind of my drink of choice. And being from Parker and small town South Dakota, sometimes you throw a little tomato juice in there. So
yes.
That's kind of what do they call that, South Dakota cocktail or whatever.
Oh, it's what do we call this?
Beer Bloody Mary.
A beer Bloody Mary. That's one.
Like
Chelada?
That. Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Bud Light now makes them in a can. They stir it up.
Yeah.
That's your next thing. Get Miller Lite to do that.
Yeah.
You're pretty good at getting people to do things.
Well,
so maybe that's your next venture.
You never know.
Miller Lite's the light beer, the domestic light beer I like to refer to as the domestic light beer that tastes like beer, that has a little beer in it. So it feels like very much there's people who love it, and that's the only one of those they will drink, or that's the only one they won't have.
Yep.
So some of us acquire different tastes than others.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. It's good to be able to do happy hour anytime.
Yeah. So besides winning the precinct committeeman election, how are you? We were talking about this just before we went on. How do you spend your days now?
That's a really good question. Summertime's easy. I can find things to do. I like to work out. I have a couple coffee groups that I am part of,
Yeah.
and I do that a couple days a week. And then I'm also still on a couple of boards, the Sioux Falls Park and Rec Board. We have a couple meetings a month, and so it just kind of keeps me connected, and I have enjoyed that immensely. And then I'm also on the board of the South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame, and so we meet quarterly. So I just got enough stuff to kind of keep me. Okay, what do I have to do this week, or what do I need to prepare for in the next couple of weeks? So you don't want to have a lot when you're retired, but you do have to have something to kind of keep you getting up and just saying, hey, I gotta do something here. And it does help a lot when you can get up and say, okay, I've got to accomplish these 3 things today.
Sure.
So I do enjoy that. And when it comes to the summertime, playing golf, I think I mentioned I probably play 3, maybe 4 days a week, and then I love to practice, believe it or not. I don't know why. I like to be out there hitting balls and working on some aspect of the swing, which hasn't really helped. Sometimes I think it helps, but it's really been I've always liked to practice, whether it be basketball, whatever sport I was doing. But I've always told people golf might be the hardest sport I've ever tried to be good at. Because one day you think you got it all figured out, the next day it's like, where did my swing go?
You're telling me.
Yeah,
all the
just
time.
One of those. It's a sport that's very, very difficult.
Or one thing is struggling. You can't hit a fairway off the tee, and then you solve that, and then all of a sudden you have the yips. Just one thing comes, one thing goes, and you never know. And for me, as someone who golfs a couple times a week, but rarely practices and hits balls, partly because I am working and I don't want to spend a lot of free time practicing.
Right.
I'll go out and play it. I'll live with the results. But another reason why I don't love practicing is how do I know? It's fun to see if you can work that kink out, right?
Yep.
Where if you hit a few balls or several or a couple dozen, and then you find that one, you're like, I think I got something here.
Right.
That's fun. But sometimes I wonder if I'm wasting time, if I'm ingraining bad habits because I don't have somebody instructing me. So,
it's a maddening game. I watch some YouTube videos, but frankly, I've kind of gotten away from that because it's more confusing than it helps. So I'm a self-taught player, and so whatever I have, whatever day it is, it's what I play with, and whether it's some days I putt okay, some days it's like putting's not there, but I usually can hit it pretty straight. I can't beat my boys anymore. Matt and Mitch have outdistanced me, but every once in a while I get just close enough to kind of scare them. But it's fun. We get to play together on the weekends.
You do, okay.
That's just a blessing for me. We're when you get to play golf with your kids, the one thing you can do anymore is golf with your boys. There really aren't very many sports I can do with my kids, but that's one of them.
Matt and Mitch, any other kids?
Those were the 2 boys, and now we have four grandkids. They each have 2.
Yeah.
Matt and his wife Monica have 2 boys, Mason and Maverick, and Mitch and Katie have Berkeley and Brock. So they all live here, so it keeps my wife happy, and it's one of the reasons we don't get too far away from home. We're chasing grandkids and doing that stuff.
I mean, that's so you're just living the life, and you've been doing it for a few years now, because you seem like you could be the type who I'm sure Sanford would have been happy to have you for as long as they could. You see so many people now. I don't know if it's more of a trend now, or you could tell me that you see more guys and women in the 70s, 80s. They just keep going. They just feel like they think they'd be bored in retirement. They want to have something to contribute full time, not just these things and that things like you. But obviously you didn't come to that point. It feels like you have the nice mix, and you've seen it on the other side now, and it appears you've enjoyed it, and you feel pretty happy with, cash the chips in, let's enjoy life.
Yeah, no, that's something, John. I think you have to be ready for retirement, and I didn't know for sure if I was ready for that, but I did know that this is going to be my next iteration of whatever my life's going to be, and I just decided, hey, this is a good time to do it. I'm going to explore some things, but I don't know if retirement always turns out just the way that you are going to plan it.
Sure.
And I'm fortunate because my kids are in town. My wife loves it here. We have friends. We play pickleball. That's the other thing I do to keep myself busy. My wife plays about 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah.
I not so much in the summer, but wintertime that takes up a lot of the time. But I've got friends that retired early out of education because they have a rule of 85 where you can retire at 55 and try to see if you want to do something else. A couple of my friends failed at that, and they went back and, like you said, they decided, I've got to do something else. There's just not enough to do. And so there's that part of it. But the last 4 years have been really fun. I've really enjoyed it, and I'll be honest, Mitch coaching and having the grandkids around, but I loved going to workouts. I did some of that in the off season, in the summertime and in the fall for kids that, not just Roosevelt kids, but kids that were, wanting to work out at Impact. I worked out a deal with Chad Wyde, who's the owner of that facility, and he allowed me to come in and work out with kids in the fall. So I still enjoy that, and it's something that maybe I'll continue to do. I'll see. I mean, I haven't gotten any plans for that right now, but just being around the game has always been something I've really liked. And I'll be honest with you, I think I liked it better when I wasn't coaching. Years later, when Mitch started coaching, I probably liked being in the gym better than I did when I was coaching myself.
Why is that?
That's a good question. I really enjoyed the process. Working with kids and helping them to get better, working on their shot, working on their ball handling. I always thought, in basketball, and I would tell parents this over the years, you don't have to play 100 games in the summer. There are opportunities with your coaches now that they can work with you in the off season, and many of them do. They do open gyms, they have camps, and that's where you get better. Now, I'm not saying anything against games because a lot of kids do it. My kids traveled and did that, but
Same here.
The thing that you have to realize, if you're going to be a basketball player, you have to be able to dribble, you have to be able to shoot, and you have to be able to handle the ball. And being able to now work in space, learning how to play the game in a 5-on-5 scenario, I always felt it was better to do 3-on-3 or even small-sided games, working so you understand how to move, how to catch, how to space, all that stuff. But
when our 3 kids, all of them were doing summer clubs, some traveled more than others, and some seasons a lot of stuff was around here, but there was always stuff at least on the weekends. And all these club games, they're just playing a lot, barely practice, and I would think, are they getting better? I don't know if they're getting better. I'm glad they like to play. I'm glad they're keeping in shape. I don't know if they're getting any better. Yep. So I love how you feel that way. And plus, how old were you when you decided to hang it up as a head coach?
I think I was 48.
Late 40s.
So,
I ask because that's somewhere in between where, for now, your son he's 38 now?
Yep.
10 great years, and we had that conversation with Mitch, and I encourage anybody to go back and Google it, Happy Hour with Mitch Begeman. It was right here, and he talked all about his decision to step down and all the great years he had. But so he was very young. And then, how long did Gail Hoover coach for? The guy you played for, like into his 70s at least?
Close.
I mean,
I think he was just short of maybe being about 70 years old.
Okay.
But I have coffee with him once a month at least, and we still talk about basketball games.
Sure.
And things that are with the game now versus back then.
And I want to get into that.
Yeah. So he won over 500 and some games. I can't remember how old he was. He was probably, close to retirement age, 60 to 65, right in there.
Okay, but you came kind of right in the middle of all this in your late 40s, and it was for a very intentional reason. It sounded like you'd told me earlier that you'd planned on. You had told O'Gorman, I've got 3 more years once Mitch graduates. No matter what happens, I'm done. Now that that's 20 years in the rearview mirror, has there ever been a part of you that felt like there was meat on the bone? Like, I wish I would have done it longer.
Yeah, and it's a good question. Really, John, I don't think so.
Because you're 26 years head coach, by the way, right?
I was 26
head
years.
Coach,
I'd done it a long time, and I loved it. O'Gorman was a great place to be. It was a great place to have my kids grow up, go to school, play. Not very many guys get to coach their kids.
Yeah.
And it was a great place for me to be able to do that. I'll never forget, I was at a coaching clinic years before they ever got even close to high school. But Larry Luchins and I were sitting at a coaching clinic, and he had coached Lance, and I think Lance was just getting ready to start at Northern in his college career. So I asked Larry, I said, any regrets ever coaching your own son? He says, not one bit. He said, it probably kept me in it a few more years. And I'll never forget that, because Larry was a good friend and a really good coach, obviously. But when he said that, because I did wonder whether or not it would be good for my kids to play for their dad.
Yeah.
And once he said that, I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this, because there's always times during the course of your career, whether you're in business or you're in education, you always start looking at what am I going to do. I always looked at my work life as every 5 years, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to be doing in 5 years? And so I kind of always have adhered to that. And I love coaching. So I did decide to start getting my degree to be a counselor principal. So I knew at some point I had to leave education, O'Gorman probably, and get back into the public school, because I wanted to get 20 years back in the public school system so I could get to teacher retirement, which is a really good thing. If you can hang in there and get your 30 years in or whatever in public education, you can retire, and it's a really good system. I couldn't do that at OG because private schools were not allowed, or they weren't in the South Dakota retirement. So that was my motivation. And so I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to be done. And I thought I was going to go be a principal, maybe a superintendent, back in a smaller school. Well, that Sanford Sioux Valley job kind of got in my way, and it was a good move, and I never looked back from there. So still got to go to games, still got to watch my son coach, so it was a good move.
Okay. How did that come about? Because that was obviously not a move you were expecting. And Sanford, for those who are newer to Sioux Falls, Sanford used to be called Sioux Valley, and then it was business, corporations, a lot of things happened. But how did this opportunity to be a manager of public relations at Sioux Valley Medical Clinic come about? That changed, obviously, your professional life.
It did. And I'll be honest with you, I was very hesitant to make that move, as I thought, what am I going to do working for a health system? And the gentleman that ended up hiring me, Ray Trankel, and another gentleman that worked at Sioux Valley at the time, Dick Bowie, who just recently passed away. And those two guys were instrumental in helping me to kind of understand, okay, this is what you can do. Your skill set, you're not a healthcare person, but your skill set is such that we need people to be able to go out and talk about the benefits of being an integrated health system, which Sanford or Sioux Valley were at the time. They had clinics, hospitals, insurance, the whole thing. And so what my role was going to basically go out into the communities where we had a clinic presence or a hospital, a Lewis Drug, for example,
all over
the
South Dakota,
place.
Southwest Minnesota, Northwest
Exactly.
Iowa.
So that was my first role, and I traveled, put a lot of miles. I had an old two-door Chrysler, and it got a lot of miles on it, but that's what I did. It was like teaching, but first of all, I had to learn about healthcare, and that was probably the most frightening thing, because you step out of your box. I was a teacher. I taught about everything you can imagine, from algebra to social studies, psychology, whatever. But now stepping into a world where I had to go and learn about, health insurance, or I had to learn about what an integrated health system was, how to explain that, because these aren't 15 and 16-year-old kids that I'm talking to. I was talking now to adults who were business owners and people that were pretty sharp in terms of, okay, we want to know, ask me questions or whatnot. So that was what I did, and I had to sharpen up my skills and my base of understanding before I could ever go out and talk to a group of people. But I loved it. It was fun. I got to meet a lot of people, and I would basically recruit my own boards of people in places like Winter, Chamberlain, Worthington, all different places, Laverne. And so and I like to talk to people, which you could probably already imagine. So it just fit, and it was a really good role. I loved it. And for about 3 years while I did that role, I was still coaching. And so I think Matt was a senior, Mitch was a freshman or sophomore, and so I coached those guys through their last few years, and that was, then I went full time with the hospital.
Okay.
So it was good.
And never looked back. By the way, did you like teaching?
I did.
Because
I'll be honest.
Because some
Yep.
coaches don't, and some
Yep.
coaches love it, and some coaches are AP, chemistry, or English teachers, and some are like, no, I really, I'm not going to name names, but there are some who just hated it. Yeah.
I think to answer that the best way, I got bored teaching. I'll be totally honest with you. I was bored, and I think, to be honest, John, I was looking for something else to kind of fulfill me a little bit, if you will. And the only way that at the time, the only way you could coach was you had to teach.
Yeah.
And so, having said all of that, I was able to still teach or coach for 3 years while I worked in another. And I think I was the first coach that ever did that in Sioux Falls. There were a couple other ones after me. Robin Burgard, if you ever, Robin coached at Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I think even Jeff Halseth might have did it for a couple years, but I think Lyle Pearson maybe. But, at the time, they were reluctant to let anyone just coach and not be in the school system, which I totally understood. But Tom Lorang and Steve Keeter, and at the time Kelby Kravinoff, my boss, said, yeah, why don't you do that? And so I did. And I was very blessed to be able to do that.
Now, it's interesting. Your son Mitch, talked about leaving, and he's off to. It's a new company. What's the company again?
MRG Hoff.
MRG Hoff, which is it's a printing, sports printing, and gear, apparel. Thank you.
Yep.
All over, it's a big company, a merge of different companies, and so he's going to kind of represent them. It sounds like do some of the kind of things you did. Drive around, talk to people, represent a brand, but he said I don't know if Roosevelt offered him to stay on without teaching, but he said he did not want to keep coaching if he wasn't teaching. So, he doesn't believe that. He believes in this day and age, and I don't know if it's different from 20 or 30 or 40 years ago or not, that he just feels like that's partly what the role of a coach should be, a guy that's available during the school hours for their players, I guess.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, transitioning from a guy that was there every day to now you're basically only there for practices and games?
Yeah, it was, I'll be honest, it was a great way to coach. And I had the advantage that I probably had at the time was, all the kids that I was going to be coaching for the next 3 years spent time at my house. They were Mitch's buddies and Matt's friends, and their parents. I knew them all. And so it wasn't really a hard transition. And the best thing about it, John, is I'd do my job. I'd probably leave my work, depending upon, probably leave about 2 o'clock, go to the gym, get ready for practice, and I got to see the kids in school, the ones that I wanted to see, the ones that I was coaching. And not that I didn't like the other ones, because there were some delightful kids, don't get me wrong. But I got to work with the kids every day that I really enjoyed being around. Yeah. And it was a great way to coach. The only problem, and I think Mitch realized this too, is when you are out of the building, it's hard to keep kids accountable. And especially in this day and age, they want to see you in the hallway. They need to see that the coach is there. And if they get in trouble, you're kind of like a surrogate parent. If you get in trouble in the classroom, those teachers, they kind of, they want to let, and Mitch wanted that. I'll never forget, the teachers, they would have an open door. Hey, so-and-so didn't get to class this morning, or so-and-so was late. Trust me, they were in more trouble when they got to his practice than they probably were when they were in the classroom. Yeah. And that was important, and that's the one thing I really, Mitch did a great job coaching. He was a good coach, really good coach. But I think the preparation and his ability to hold kids accountable, they really respected that. And I think that was important for him to establish that relationship, not just with the kids, but with the entirety of the other teachers in the building. And I think that's why that's important.
Had to make you proud.
Very proud.
That part of
Yep.
it. I know the wins and the state championships.
Yeah,
made
that's
you
all
proud,
great.
but-
That's all.
Yeah.
On both my sons, I'm blessed. Thank God they take after their mother because, Matt and Mitch, I think are. I always tell people they're better versions of what I was as a parent, and they're good parents. They're great to their kids. They, do the right things, and I don't know how they do it, but sometimes I must have said something right, or their mom and I together, hopefully raise them the right way.
I'm guessing so. Well, let's walk that back to how you grew up. But were you born and raised in Parker whole time?
I was born and raised on a farm north of Parker.
Okay.
And it was a great way to grow up. You don't know any better. I mean, I grew up with 3 siblings, a brother, 2 brothers, and a sister, and so we were both about in the same vintage. But I went to Monroe Grade School, which closed quickly after I was probably a second grader and it closed. So then I had to go to a rural school, a country school. So I'm one of the last surviving people that actually went to a country school, a 1-room schoolhouse. So that was for about 1 year.
Wow, that's like from, what is it, Little House on the Prairie?
Oh, it was. And when I tell people that, because that wasn't going on. But what was going on during that time was consolidation of schools, and from Parker to Marion to Canastota to Humboldt, Hartford. All of those smaller towns were going through reorganization, and where my farm was right on the kind of on the boundary between what would become West Central and Parker. And my dad went to Parker High School, played football, loved to play, but didn't play basketball. But anyway, when it came time for us to choose our school, they chose Parker. And so that's how I ended up going to Parker instead of to West Central, was where I ended up coaching about 20-some years later,
Yeah, no kidding.
which is another story. But anyway, I was very fortunate. Gail Hoover was at Parker, and I think that was one of the reasons my dad, because he knew I liked sports, and I don't know if I was old enough to really play much basketball at 3rd grade, but I really liked it. And Parker had a reputation of having good teams, and obviously the coach was one of the best coaches ever in the state, and so that's where I ended up.
So is Gail the high school coach when you were like in grade school?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so he was already the guy. And was he already well established?
Pretty much. He came there, and I think right after I was born. And so when we have coffee, I always remind him that you started coaching in 1957 was when I was born.
Yeah.
And I think he came to Parker in 59.
Wow.
And so, he was already a legend by the time he got to Parker, not only as a coach, but probably more as a player.
Yeah.
He was the all-time leading scorer at Sioux Falls College and in the whole state of South Dakota.
Okey
So
doke.
anyway, he had already
Wow.
established himself as quite a player, and he had the utmost respect. And kids that went to Parker and played basketball, I mean, there was an expectation that, okay, we're supposed to be good here, and they were good. They had state tournament appearances in 64, 66, and 68. And I remember watching those players, and of course you kind of idolize them when you're growing up, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yes.
So,
Well, I mean, were most of these state tournaments in the Sioux Falls Arena?
Oh, yeah.
So give people, plenty of people who are watching this and have lived in Sioux Falls for a long time, followed the sports, they know exactly what Mike's talking about. Again, some younger people or those who are newer to Sioux Falls, even within the last 10 or 15 years, it's been a while. I got to call some of the last state tournaments in the old Sioux Falls Arena, but what was it like in the 60s?
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And I didn't get to attend one until, I believe, the 1969 state final. I had an uncle who was a teacher, and he had an extra ticket. And it was the final between DeSmet and Oneida that went like 3 overtimes.
Okay.
And Dave Thomas was there. Well, anyway, prior to that, go back to 1960, the state tournament was played in Huron. And so then they moved it to Sioux Falls to the new arena, and that became its home for a long
new
time.
arena, the new Mecca.
Yep.
And paint the picture of what it was like in there during the games.
Yeah, it was. The first state tournament game I played in, I was a sophomore, and we opened up the tournament. First game, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had seen him on TV, but you just, as a kid, you're watching. There's a lot of people there, I think, and the Jim Burt was doing the play-by-play, and That's a name from the past if you don't remember
Kello
that.
TV
But
sports guy.
yeah, he was phenomenal.
Legend.
But anyway, I walk out on the floor or out of the locker room, and I'll never forget, there were kids sitting on the cement areas behind the backboard. There wasn't enough room for people. I think it held like 9,500 people.
And it was all bleachers, correct?
Bleachers. There were chairs. Remember the old chair backs up on top?
Okay.
So there were bleachers on the bottom and chair backs on the top, and there wasn't a place to sit.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, wow, this is like unbelievable. And so that was in 1973. That was my sophomore year, and we got into the tournament kind of we weren't so really supposed to be very good, but we kind of snuck in the back door.
Okay.
And we ended up beating a good Bottle team in the first round and got to the second game against Sioux Valley, who was led by an all-state point guard that was a really good player, Henry Linkeek. George Kiner was the coach, and they were one of the favorites. And we just came out and got after them, and we ended up winning by 20 points. And George Kiner is still a friend. He does a lot of things with his books and state track meets, has books that depict a lot of the state tournaments and a lot of just sports stuff over the years. Well, I ended up having 28 points in that game, and every time he sees me, he'll say, Begeman, you really ruined my year that year. And I said, sorry, Coach.
Yeah.
It really made our year pretty good.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of memories. And then we played Emory in the state final, and of course, got second, which was one we should have won. But Coach Hoover and I talk about those. As hard as it was to lose those, you still have to get there. And I think that was the one thing he told me. He says, you don't ever have to define your career as a coach or a player by, how many state tournaments you win or lose or what. The fact that you played in them and you got there and you got families and kids and parents to go to the state tournament, because that was a big deal for Class B teams. They get there maybe once out of every 20, 25 years back then.
Yeah.
We were fortunate to play in a couple, and it was a huge deal for the town. There's kids and people that I still run into. Hey, I remember that game in 1974 when you guys played so-and-so. But it was a phenomenal environment, John. I get off track a little bit, but
that's okay.
It's that old environment. People don't they think even Matt and Mitch, although there was a game,
There's
the final,
footage out there.
There's footage, and the place was electric. And everybody in the state, if you were a basketball fan, you wanted to get a ticket.
Yeah, that's so awesome. By the way, because you had 2 runner-ups as a player?
2 runner player, yeah.
And 4 as a coach at O'Gorman. Did that attitude that Gail brought forth to you, did that help you in any way with your processing of the 4 as a coach?
It did. And, you're always disappointed. You want to win. And I remember the first year when I was at O'Gorman and we got to the state tournament. They had not been to a state tournament since 1967. I got there in 88. And, of course, all the football championships, and Bob was still there. He was kind of on the staff as an AD. Coach Keeter was there, obviously. And everybody understood the football championship culture. But when we got to the state tournament in 1990, it was my second year there, I think. And I just remember our cheerleaders had no idea what was going to happen. We were going to be at the state tournament for 3 days. It was in Sioux Falls. And we had no idea what to do. My players, how many games we get to play? Well, we get to play 3 more games. Oh, okay. Well, and all of a sudden we got there and it was like, hey, this is pretty cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the kids that I started with when I got there, 3 of them were sophomores. Ryan Folsom, who coached at Sioux Falls, Washington for a while, was a sophomore. Scott Bickett, who I think he's an insurance salesman in Minneapolis. And Scott Hunter, I believe his son, Lucas, played on the Lincoln High team this year. So those 3 guys were sophomores on my first team there. And by 1990, we got to the state tournament. And it was like, this is pretty cool. Exactly.
Norman Dale said in Hoosiers.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
We're kind of bouncing back and forth, which is just okay. So Gale was very well respected, and he was the guy that you wanted to play for. And then you get to Parker, and what kind of Head coach was he? What was his style? What was his personality? What did you like, or what was challenging about playing for him?
There was nothing challenging. He got the best out of his athletes. And I've told him this numerous times. I think coaches that can get players to even play beyond what they're capable of. I know it sounds kind of corny, but he was one of those guys that just gave you confidence because he was very prepared, and we played a certain style, and we could shoot, and we had during my time we had some really good athletes too, a couple big kids. Dale Buskell was a 6'5" post player who would have been in school with me at Monroe when it closed. Mike Lee was an all-state football player, and all three of us came from that Monroe area to Parker. And Coach Hoover was just one of those guys that you didn't want to disappoint him. And I think that's the mark of a really good coach, an excellent coach, is when you play for someone that you don't want to let down, you will do anything, run through a wall, whatever the old adages are. He was that kind of a coach, and he never yelled. You knew when he was not happy, but he never would yell, never curse. He would just always be able to get you, whether we were up or down. He was always coaching, and he wanted us to be gentlemen. He wanted us to be better people than we were players. And so we always kind of had that underlying feeling that we weren't going to disappoint Coach Hoover, and that was kind of how we grew up.
Well, knowing that you're still good friends with him and having coffee with him regularly, I'm guessing that shaped partly the way you coached. Did you take a lot of notes from that?
I did. I think anybody that coaches, you do glean some things from people you played for, and I certainly did from him. I was probably a little more emotional than he was. I was kind of like Mitch. I was up and down the sidelines. I didn't sit much, and I think I probably got after the officials a little more than Coach Hoover did and Mitch did, but that was my style. I was into the game. I wanted, coaching players. I didn't yell at them per se too much as far as getting mad at them, but just trying to motivate them. And so I was very fortunate. I had great kids at Oklahoma. I had great kids at West Central and Coleman. But I did glean a lot of what I think coaching for me. I always wanted to look back. Okay, that's what Coach Hoover did. I'm going to try to do that. It was he was an easy one to follow, and I was fortunate to play for Mel Klein at Augie. And Mel was a little different coach than Coach Hoover, but still some things I think I gleaned from both of them.
Describe, first of all, why you decided to go to Augie. Who else were you looking at? And
I was fortunate. I had an opportunity. I could have probably gone to USD. South Dakota State was in the mix. When Jim Marking was the head coach, my junior year, he recruited me, and we were at a game. In fact, we were playing against Hamlin. The very first high school game played in Frost Arena was a prelim game to a college game, and we were playing Hamlin. So Steve Brown, who was a senior, I was a junior, we played them in the very first high school game at Frost. And
that had to have been
it was
cool.
Fun. It was very cool. That was a beautiful.
And how big of a deal was Frost Arena?
It was like the best arena in the state, other than maybe the Sioux Falls Arena, which wasn't very old, but Frost was very cool. And the crowds, I never did get to see a crowd in the old barn, as they called it, but Frost Arena was great. And Coach Marking, I remember after the game, he asked Coach Hoover if he could talk to me, and he said sure. So I talked to him. So he wanted me to come to South Dakota State the next year. Well, he leaves to go sell insurance, and I end up, getting connected with the Augie coaches, Mel Klein, John Thomas, and at the time Jack Doyle at USD. It was those two that were pretty close, and I ended up choosing Augie.